Tommaso Milano's control was legendary. Men twice his age spoke his name in whispers. Rivals vanished without a trace. His empire ran on fear so profound it looked like respect, and at the center of it all stood Tommaso, cold, calculated, untouchable. Control was survival. Emotion was death. He'd learned that at 8 years old when his mother walked out and never looked back. Learned it again at 16 when his father bled out in his arms, gasping warnings about trust and weakness. By 25, Tommaso had perfected the art of feeling nothing, and by 33, he'd convinced himself it was permanent. Then he saw Marco touching Lily's desk. Not touching her, not quite, but close enough that the 12 inches between them felt intimate. Close enough that Tommaso could see the ease in Marco's posture, the softness in Lily's expression, the way they existed together in a bubble of warmth that had no place in his ice palace. Tommaso stood in the doorway of his office, and something inside him cracked. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The sound started as pressure, a ringing in his ears, a tightness in his chest that felt like drowning. Then it sharpened into rage, white-hot, consuming, the kind of rage that preceded body bags and burning buildings. Marco was smiling at her. And Lily, God. Lily was looking at him like he'd hung the moon. Her face was tilted up, catching the afternoon light, and she was radiant. Tommaso had seen her angry, focused, exhausted, professional. But this unguarded joy? He'd never seen this. And it was for Marco. The realization detonated something ancient and vicious inside him. His vision tunneled, his hands curled into fists. The contracts he was holding crumpled in his grip, but he barely noticed. All he could see was Lily's smile. All he could feel was the unbearable, suffocating need to make sure no one else ever saw it again. Boss. Marco's voice cut through the red haze. Lily spun toward him, and the smile died like he'd shot it. Her eyes went wide, not with professional alarm, but with genuine fear. The kind of fear that recognized predators. Smart girl. Tommaso walked forward. Each step was measured, controlled, but inside he was screaming. Inside he wanted to tear the office apart. Wanted to grab Marco and slam him against the glass until he understood that some lines didn't exist to be crossed. But he did none of that. He was Tommaso Milano. He didn't lose control. Except he was losing it right now, and Lily could see it. He watched her throat work as she swallowed, watched her hands smooth down her skirt in a nervous gesture she probably didn't realize she was making, watched her try desperately to reconstruct her professional mask. Too late. He'd already seen the truth. She wasn't his untouchable secretary anymore. She was a woman who could smile like that, who could laugh like that, who could make his most loyal capo look at her like she was something precious. The thought should have made him dismiss her, should have made him transfer her to another department, another city, anywhere that wasn't within his line of sight. Instead, it made him want to lock every door and never let her leave. Tommaso stopped in front of her desk, close, too close. Professional distance was a memory he'd just burned to ash. The Singapore files, he said, his voice a rasp of controlled violence. My office. Now. Yes, Signor. He walked past her, and his control fractured. His hand found her back just above her hip, right where the silk of her blouse met the waistband of her skirt. The touch was brief, possessive, impossible to misinterpret. Lily inhaled sharply. He felt her whole body react to him, felt the way she froze like prey, realizing it was being hunted. Perfect. He kept walking, didn't look back, didn't give her time to process. Behind him, he heard Marco's careful breathing, heard Lily's shaky exhale, heard the moment they both realized the world had shifted on its axis. Tommaso reached his office and closed the door. Then he braced his hands on his desk and let himself feel it. The rage, the jealousy, the consuming need to burn down everything Marco had built in that 30-second conversation. 18 months. 18 months of perfect control, and it shattered because Lily Conrad smiled at someone else. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't calculation. This was obsession. And Tommaso knew with the cold certainty that had kept him alive this long that he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. He'd ignored her because she was safe that way. Now she'd never be safe again. Lily arrived at 7:43 a.m., exactly 17 minutes early, same as always, and knew immediately that something had changed. The lobby felt wrong. Not different. Wrong. Like walking into a room where everyone had just stopped talking about you. Antonio, the head of security who usually greeted her with a gruff nod, went completely still when she stepped through the revolving doors. His hand moved to his earpiece. His eyes tracked her across the marble floor with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She was being watched. Not casually. Not incidentally. Deliberately. Lily kept her expression neutral and her stride confident, but her pulse kicked up. She'd worked in Tommaso Milano's orbit long enough to recognize the signs of a predator marking territory. And somehow, between yesterday afternoon and this morning, she'd become the territory. The elevator ride to the 48th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the outer office was empty. Marco's usual morning presence conspicuously absent. Her desk looked exactly as she'd left it. Except for one thing. A new keycard sat centered on her keyboard. Black. Matte finish. No company logo. Lily picked it up slowly, her stomach tightening. She knew what this was. Everyone in the organization knew what the black keycards meant. Access to Tommaso's inner sanctum. The private office where he conducted the business that never appeared in quarterly reports. She'd never been given one before. She'd never needed one before. "Good morning, Miss Conrad." Lily spun. Tommaso stood in the doorway to his office. When had he opened the door, dressed in charcoal gray that made him look like expensive violence? His expression was perfectly neutral, perfectly controlled, except his eyes. His eyes were dark and focused, and utterly devoid of the professional distance she'd relied on for 18 months. "Signore Milano." Her voice came out steady. Good morning. "You'll be working from my office today." Not a question. A statement. "I have several projects that require your immediate attention, and the configuration will be more efficient." Efficient. Right. Of course. Lily kept her tone pleasant, professional. "Should I bring my laptop? Or, everything you need is already inside." He stepped back, holding the door open, an invitation that felt like a command. Lily walked past him, and the air between them crackled. She didn't look at him, didn't dare, but she felt his attention like a physical weight on her shoulders, her spine, the back of her neck. The inner office was exactly as cold and perfect as she'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, black leather, chrome, and glass. A second desk had been positioned perpendicular to his, close enough to speak without raising voices, far enough to maintain the illusion of propriety. The illusion was paper-thin. "I've reassigned several contracts to your oversight," Tommaso said, moving to his own desk with that predatory grace she'd never noticed before. "The Tehran acquisition, the Singapore merger, and the Montreal infrastructure deal. I want your analysis by end of week." Lily set her bag down carefully, her mind racing. Those were million-dollar projects, C-suite responsibility, the kind of work that would keep her chained to this office for 12-hour days, the kind of work that would keep her away from Marco. She turned to face him, and found him already watching her, not working, not reviewing files, just watching, with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "That's quite a workload," she said evenly. "May I ask why the sudden reassignment?" "You've proven yourself capable. Yesterday I was capable of managing your calendar. Today I'm capable of overseeing international acquisitions." She tilted her head, letting just enough challenge into her voice. "That's quite a promotion in 16 hours. Something flickered in his expression there, and gone so fast she might have imagined it. Approval, maybe, or warning. "You have a problem with the assignment, Miss Conrad?" "No, sir." She sat down at the new desk, logging into the system with the credentials that had somehow already been created. "Just clarifying expectations." "My expectation?" Tommaso said quietly, is that you'll be exactly where I need you to be. The subtext landed like a blade between her ribs. This wasn't about contracts. This wasn't about efficiency. This was about control. The morning passed in suffocating silence. Tommaso worked, or appeared to work, with the same ruthless focus he always had. But Lily felt his awareness of her like static electricity. He didn't look at her often, but when he did, the weight of his gaze made her forget how to breathe. She tried to focus on the Tehran file, tried to lose herself in numbers and negotiation points and risk assessments. But her attention kept fragmenting, kept circling back to the man across from her who'd built a career on being invisible until he struck. At 11:37, her phone buzzed. A text from Marco. You okay? Before she could respond, Tommaso's voice cut through the silence. Personal calls can wait until lunch. Lily looked up. He hadn't moved, hadn't glanced at her phone, but somehow, he'd known. It's work-related, she said coolly. Then it can go through official channels. It's from Marco. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Tommaso set down his pen with surgical precision. When he looked at her, his expression was perfectly calm, the kind of calm that preceded executions. Marco, he said slowly, has his own assignments today. If he requires your attention, he can submit a formal request through my office. Since when does your capo need permission to text your secretary? Since I decided his time would be better spent elsewhere. The words were professional. The tone was anything but. Lily leaned back in her chair, studying him. This close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the rigid control in his shoulders. He was furious. Not the explosive kind of fury, the cold, calculating kind that toppled empires. Signor Milano, she said carefully, if I've done something to upset you, I'd prefer you tell me directly rather than, you've done nothing wrong. Then why does it feel like I'm being punished? His eyes locked on hers, and for one terrible electric moment, she saw past the ice. Saw something raw and possessive and absolutely unhinged staring back at her. You're not being punished, Miss Conrad. His voice was soft, deadly. You're being protected. From what? Distractions. Lily's heart kicked against her ribs. Distractions, she repeated flatly. Anything that interferes with your work. He stood, moving around his desk with that fluid, predatory grace. Anyone who takes your focus away from where it should be. He stopped in front of her desk, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her thoughts scatter. And where, she asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded, should my focus be? Tommaso's gaze dropped to her mouth for one heartbeat. 2. Then he reached past her slowly, deliberately, and tapped the manila folder on her desk. The Tehran acquisition. Here, he said quietly. On the work I give you, in the space I provide, under my supervision. His hand lingered near hers. Not touching. Not quite. If that's unclear, he continued, his voice dropping to something that felt like velvet over razors. I can simplify further. Lily's temper flared. She'd spent 18 months being professional, being perfect, being invisible, and now he wanted to cage her because of one smile she'd shared with someone else? She stood abruptly, forcing him to step back or collide with her. He didn't step back. They were inches apart, her chin tilted up, his gaze burning down at her. The air between them vibrated with tension so thick it felt like drowning. Let me simplify something for you, Signore Milano, she said, her voice low and sharp. I don't appreciate being moved around like a chess piece. I don't appreciate surveillance disguised as concern. And I really don't appreciate being isolated from my colleagues because you've decided to throw a territorial fit. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes ignited. Careful, Miss Conrad. Or what? She held his stare, refusing to back down. You'll fire me? Reassign me? Lock me in your office permanently? I could. He leaned in fractionally and her breath caught. Would you like to test which option I'd choose? They stared at each other, two wills colliding in the space between heartbeats. Then Tommaso stepped back, his control sliding back into place like armor. "The Singapore files," he said, his tone perfectly professional again. "I'll need your preliminary analysis by 5. Lily exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. "Of course." He returned to his desk, sat down, picked up his pen like nothing had happened. But something had happened. The line between employer and employee had just burned to ash, and they both knew it. At 4:47 p.m., exactly 24 hours after everything changed, Lily's phone buzzed again. Another text from Marco. "Late shift tonight. Parking garage, be careful." She glanced up. Tommaso was on a call, his attention apparently elsewhere. She typed back, "Why?" The response was immediate. "Because he's watching you. And he doesn't share." Before she could process that, Tommaso ended his call and stood. "I'll walk you to your car tonight." Lily blinked. "That's not necessary." It wasn't a request. He moved to the coat rack, pulling on his jacket with precise, controlled movements. "There's been chatter about security vulnerabilities in the building. Until we've assessed the threat, I'll be personally ensuring your safety." "Personally?" "Yes." "Every night?" His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable, and absolutely certain. "Every night you're in this building. Every moment you're within my reach." He crossed to her desk and held out his hand. "Your keys, Miss Conrad." "Why do you need my—" "Because I'm driving you home." His hand didn't waver. "And before you argue, understand that this is the only option I'm offering." Lily stared at him, her mind racing through implications and power plays and the cold certainty that she'd just lost another piece of her independence. But she also saw the truth in his expression. He wasn't asking permission. He was establishing ownership. She dropped her keys into his palm, and his fingers closed around them, and for just a moment, around hers. "Good girl," he murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. Then he released her hand and walked toward the door, her keys disappearing into his pocket like they'd always belonged there. Like she'd always belonged to him. The silence had teeth. It had been 3 days since Tommaso moved Lily into his inner office, and the quiet between them had evolved from uncomfortable to weaponized. He worked. She worked. They existed in the same 1,200 square feet, like planets in opposing orbits, close enough to feel the gravitational pull, careful never to collide. Except Lily was done being careful. At 2:17 p.m. on Thursday, she set down her pen with deliberate precision and broke the silence like glass. "Signore Milano, if you need a date for staring contests, I charge overtime." She didn't look up from the contract in front of her. "Otherwise, I'll need you to sign page 14. The air shifted. Tommaso had been reviewing the Montreal files or pretending to, but now his attention locked onto her with the focus of a sniper acquiring a target. She felt it like pressure against her skin. "Page 14, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Unless you'd prefer to continue glowering at the back of my head." Lily finally looked up, meeting his gaze with practiced calm. "Though I should warn you, I don't intimidate easily, and you're killing my concentration." For 3 heartbeats, he didn't move. Then, he stood. The movement was fluid, unhurried, and absolutely predatory. He walked around his desk with the kind of control that made her pulse kick up despite her bravado. He didn't come toward her, not directly. Instead, he moved to the window, hands sliding into his pockets, his silhouette backlit by the city skyline. "Tell me about Tuesday," he said. Lily's stomach tightened. "You'll need to be more specific. It was a long day." 4:47 p.m. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Almost. "You were standing by the window. Marco was at your desk." There it was. "We were talking," she said carefully. "About? Does it matter?" "It does to me." He turned, and the light caught his face, all sharp angles and controlled intensity. "What was so amusing?" Lily leaned back in her chair, forcing herself to appear relaxed even as her instincts screamed danger. "He told me about his sister's wedding. The groom got the date wrong and showed up a day early. It was funny." Funny enough to make you smile like that." "Like what?" "Like you meant it." The words landed with surgical precision, cutting through her defenses. Lily's breath caught, but she recovered quickly. I'm not sure what you're implying, but if my facial expressions are now subject to approval, what else do you talk about? Tommaso moved closer, each step measured. When I'm not there, when you think no one's watching. Work, mostly. Marco's professional. I didn't ask if he was professional. He stopped at the edge of her desk, looking down at her with eyes that saw too much. I asked what you talk about. Lily stood, refusing to let him have the high ground. Why does it matter? He's your capo, I'm your secretary. We occasionally exchange pleasantries. That's what human beings do. You're not his anything. The words came out quiet, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. And he knows that now. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Excuse me? Tommaso tilted his head, studying her like she was a contract he was considering breaking. Marco is loyal, perceptive. He understands boundaries. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. He won't make that mistake again. What mistake? Lily's voice sharpened. Having a conversation? Making me laugh? Being friendly? Making you smile? The confession hung between them like a drawn blade. Lily stared at him, her mind racing through implications and power plays, and the cold realization that this wasn't about Marco at all. This was about ownership, about territory, about a man who'd spent 18 months ignoring her existence and couldn't handle watching someone else acknowledge it. You don't get to decide who makes me smile, she said, her voice low and fierce. Don't I? He moved not toward her but around the desk, closing the distance until he stood between her and the door. Not touching, not threatening, but absolutely trapping her in the space between his body and the glass window behind her. I saw something I didn't like, Tommaso said quietly, his voice dropping to something that felt like gravel and silk. And I made sure it wouldn't happen again. By isolating me, by keeping you where you belong. I don't belong to you. His eyes darkened. You've worked for me for 18 months, Miss Conrad. You've seen things that would put most people in witness protection. You know how this organization works. He leaned in not far, just enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark irises. You know what happens when I claim something. Lily's breath came faster. I'm not something to claim. No. His gaze raked over her face, her eyes, her mouth, the pulse hammering at her throat. You're far more valuable than that. Then treat me like it. I am. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Do you think I let just anyone this close? Do you think I trust easily? His jaw tightened. You stood in that sunshine laughing with Marco, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something I thought I'd excised from my chest. What? The word escaped before she could stop it. Tommaso's smile was cold, dangerous, and devastatingly honest. Want. The admission detonated in the space between them. Lily's hands curled into fists at her sides. So you locked me in your office like a possession. I secured what's mine before someone else decided it wasn't. I'm not. Yes, he interrupted, his voice dropping to something that felt like a brand against her skin. You are. He stepped back then, giving her space but not freedom. His expression smoothed into professional neutrality, but his eyes still burned with that terrible, consuming focus. The Singapore files, he said, his tone returning to business. I'll need them by end of day. Lily couldn't speak, couldn't process, couldn't reconcile the man who'd just claimed her like territory with the one now discussing contracts like nothing had happened. Tommaso walked back to his desk and sat down, picking up his pen with steady hands. And Miss Conrad? He didn't look up. Next time you want to challenge me, make sure you're prepared for the answer. Lily returned to her chair on shaking legs, her mind reeling. He'd pushed back. And somewhere in the collision, the professional distance between them had burned to nothing. She stared at the contract in front of her, the words blurring, her heart still racing. Because Tommaso Milano had just told her she was his, and he'd meant every word. Tommaso slid a manila folder across Lily's desk at 9:23 a.m. Friday morning. Shipment manifests from the past 6 months, he said, returning to his chair without ceremony. Cross-reference them with the corresponding invoices. Note any discrepancies. Lily looked at the folder, then at him. You have an entire accounting department for this. I do. And yet, you're giving it to your secretary. I'm giving it to you. He opened his laptop, his attention already shifting. By Monday. She pulled the folder toward her, flipping it open. Page after page of dense numerical data, shipping codes, warehouse receipts. The kind of tedious, mind-numbing work designed to keep someone busy and out of the way. Except Tommaso Milano didn't waste time on busy work. This was a test. Lily glanced up. He wasn't looking at her, but she felt his awareness like static in the air. He was waiting to see what she'd do, whether she'd complain, whether she'd miss the point, whether she'd prove herself capable of more than answering phones and managing his calendar. She opened her laptop without another word. By noon, she'd found the first irregularity. A shipment logged as arriving at the Newark warehouse on August 14th, but the corresponding invoice was dated August 11th, 3 days early. Not impossible, but unusual. She flagged it and kept going. By 3 p.m., she'd found 4 more. Different warehouses, different dates, but always the same pattern. Invoices predating arrivals by 2 to 4 days. By 6 p.m., the pattern had solidified into something that made her pulse quicken. Every discrepancy involved the same shipping company. Every invoice was signed by the same warehouse manager. And every shipment had been classified as high-priority client materials, which meant they bypassed standard security protocols. Someone was moving things through Tommaso's supply chain that weren't supposed to be there. Lily sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't incompetence, this was deliberate, careful, and it had been going on for months. She looked up. Tommaso was watching her, not pretending to work, not glancing casually, watching with the full weight of his attention, his expression unreadable. Find something? His voice was neutral, but she heard the edge beneath it. Yes. Show me. She stood and brought her laptop to his desk, setting it down and angling the screen toward him. Newark, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. 6 shipments over 4 months. Every invoice is early filed before the shipment physically arrives. Same shipping company, same warehouse supervisor approving them. Tommaso leaned forward, his eyes scanning the data with predatory focus. Could be a filing error, he said. Could be. Lily pulled up another screen. Except the supervisor Vincent Caruso has perfect records everywhere else. 14 years with the company. Never a single mistake until 4 months ago. She tapped the screen. This isn't incompetence. It's camouflage. Tommaso's jaw tightened imperceptibly. What's he moving? I can't tell from the manifests, but whatever it is, he's coding it as client priority to skip inspections. She met his gaze. He's using your reputation as cover. For a long moment, Tommaso said nothing. Then he closed the laptop and stood. Good work. The words were quiet, matter of fact, but coming from him, they felt like battlefield promotions. What do you want me to do? Lily asked. Keep digging, quietly. He moved to the window, his silhouette sharp against the dying light. No one else sees this. Not accounting, not security. Just you and me. What about Marco? Tommaso's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. Marco has other responsibilities. Translation. Marco was being kept deliberately out of this loop. Lily understood immediately. This was trust, the dangerous, irreversible kind. Tommaso was bringing her into his world not as decoration or convenience, but as an asset. A partner in something that could get people killed. Understood, she said. He turned, and his eyes held something she'd never seen before. Calculation mixed with something darker, more personal. You're sharper than I gave you credit for, he said. Should I be offended you underestimated me? No, his voice dropped. You should be concerned I won't make that mistake again. They worked until midnight. The city sprawled below them in rivers of light, and the office felt like a bunker, isolated, intimate, dangerous. Tommaso made calls in Italian, his voice low and lethal. Lily pulled financial records, tracking Caruso's bank accounts, travel patterns, known associates. At 11:47, she found the connection. His brother-in-law, she said, breaking the silence, works for a shipping conglomerate that competes with 3 of your active contracts. Caruso's been feeding him, routing information. Tommaso's expression didn't change, but his stillness became absolute. How long? Based on the pattern? At least 6 months. Names. She rattled off the details, addresses, account numbers, shell companies. Tommaso listened with the focus of a man memorizing targets. When she finished, he stood and walked to the safe, built into the far wall. He input the code, not hiding it from her, which felt significant, and retrieved a single USB drive. "Everything you found," he said, turning. "Transfer it here, encrypted. Then, delete your local copies." Lily took the drive. "What happens to Caruso?" "Nothing you need to concern yourself with." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." He moved closer, and the air thickened. "You found the leak. I deal with the consequences. That's how this works." "This?" she repeated. "As in you and me, working together? Or you giving me orders I'm supposed to follow blindly?" His eyes locked onto hers. "This," he said quietly, "as in you being smart enough to prove I need you for more than scheduling meetings. And me being smart enough to keep you close while I clean up the mess." The weight of those words settled over her like chains. "You're not asking," Lily said slowly. "You're telling me I'm involved now. You became involved the moment you smiled at Marco." Tommaso's voice was soft, inexorable. "Everything after that has been damage control." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression, something cold and decisive. He made a call, spoke 3 sentences in Italian, hung up. Then he looked at her with eyes that had gone utterly flat. "My security team will be at your apartment in 20 minutes, he said. "They're installing a panic room." Lily's stomach dropped. "What? You found the leak? That makes you valuable." His tone was clinical, emotionless. "It also makes you a target. The installation is non-negotiable. You can't just—" "I can. And I am." He moved to his desk, already shifting focus. "Antonio will drive you home. The team will work through the night. You'll have a direct line to my personal security. Tommaso." He looked up, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "You're inside now, Lily, all the way inside." His voice dropped to something that felt like ownership wrapped in warning. "And I protect what's mine." She stared at him, her mind reeling. This wasn't about romance. This wasn't about desire. This was about possession, strategy, the cold calculus of a man who just decided she was too valuable to lose. Lily's hands trembled as she saved the files to the encrypted drive. Because she'd just realized Tommaso wasn't protecting her out of obligation, he was protecting her because losing her was no longer an option he'd allow the universe to present. The city archives occupied the 3rd basement level of the building, a climate-controlled maze of records and filing systems that predated digital storage. Lily had been sent down to retrieve hard copies of warehouse contracts from 2019, part of the expanded investigation into Caruso's network. She'd expected dust and fluorescent lighting. She hadn't expected Marco. He stood at the end of aisle 7, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, expression carefully neutral, but his presence here 3 floors below ground, in a space rarely accessed, at 7:42 p.m. on a Saturday wasn't casual. This was deliberate. "Miss Conrad?" he said quietly. Lily's hand tightened on the file box she was carrying. "Marco, I need 5 minutes of your time. Does Tommaso know you're here?" Something flickered in Marco's expression, not quite amusement, not quite resignation. "No. And he won't. That's the point." Lily set the box down slowly, her pulse kicking up. The archives felt suddenly smaller, the walls closer. "If this is about the leak investigation, it's not." Marco stepped forward, closing the distance to something conversational but not threatening. "It's about you. And the situation you're in." "I'm not in a situation." Lily. Her name, spoken without formality, landed like a warning. I've known the boss for 12 years. I've seen him negotiate with cartels, dismantle rival families, and walk away from a building collapse without breaking stride. He paused. I have never seen him lose control. Until you. The words settled in her chest like stones. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. Yes, you do. Marco's voice was steady, matter of fact. You've been in his inner office for a week, you've felt the pressure. You've seen the way he watches you. His eyes held hers. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Lily said nothing. Marco exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, the first sign of genuine tension she'd seen from him. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Marco, please. The quiet desperation in that single word made her stop. All right, she said softly. Marco looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing her face. Then he spoke with the careful precision of a man delivering classified intelligence. That day in your office when I was talking with you, it wasn't an accident. His expression remained calm, but his voice carried weight. I sought you out. I wanted to know if the woman I'd been watching for months was as sharp and genuine as she appeared. Lily's breath caught. Why? Because I was interested. The admission came without hesitation. You're brilliant, self-possessed, and funny in a way that feels honest. I wanted to see if there was a chance you'd say yes if I asked you to dinner. Marco, He held up a hand. I know what you're going to say, and I need you to understand. I'm not here for an answer. I'm here to tell you I'm stepping back. Lily stared at him. Because of Tommaso. Because of what he feels for you. Marco's voice was steady, unflinching, and what that means for everyone involved. He doesn't feel anything, Lily said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. He's possessive, controlling, but that's not love? Marco's smile was sad, knowing. No, not yet. But it's the closest he's come in 15 years, and that's more dangerous than if it were. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the stagnant air. I don't understand. I know. Marco moved to the archive shelf, leaning against it like he needed the support. The boss doesn't do vulnerability, he doesn't do emotional risk. He runs his entire life like a military operation, because control is the only thing that's never betrayed him. That's not an excuse for... I'm not excusing him. Marco's voice sharpened slightly. I'm explaining him. There's a difference. He looked at her then, and his expression held something that made her chest ache: regret, loyalty, and a fierce protectiveness that wasn't romantic. Tommaso lost his mother when he was 8, Marco said quietly. She didn't die. She left. Walked out of their home in Naples and never came back. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. He paused. His father told him it was because she couldn't handle the life, the danger, the isolation. She chose freedom over her son. Lily felt something crack inside her chest. He learned early that attachment is a weapon people use against you, Marco continued. So he doesn't attach. He commands, he controls, he builds empires and burns anyone who threatens them. His eyes held hers. Until you. I haven't done anything, Lily whispered. You smiled at me. Marco's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. You stood in that sunshine and you looked happy, and for the first time in years, Tommaso wanted something he couldn't take by force or buy with money. He wanted you to look at him that way. Voluntarily. Genuinely. He doesn't know how. Marco pushed off the shelf. The man who runs half the eastern seaboard doesn't know how to ask for something without commanding it. So he does what he knows. He isolates you, watches you, traps you in proximity until you can't escape. Lily's hands were shaking. That's not protection. That's obsession. It's both. Marco's expression was grim, and it's the only way he knows how to keep something he's afraid to lose. The words landed like bullets. You're telling me this why? Lily asked, her voice unsteady. Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. And because you need to know he's not being honest with you. Lily's stomach dropped. What is that? Internal security reports, dated 3 weeks before you found the leak. Marco held the envelope out. Tommaso knew about Caruso. He's known for almost a month. He let it continue. Her blood turned to ice. Why? I don't know. Maybe he was building a case. Maybe he was waiting to see who else was involved. Marco's voice dropped. Or maybe he was waiting for an excuse to bring you deeper into his world, to make you indispensable. Lily took the envelope with numb fingers. He needs to trust you more than he needs to control you, Marco said quietly. But he doesn't know the difference yet. And until he does, you're in danger not from his enemies, but from him. What am I supposed to do with this? Marco moved toward the elevator, then stopped, looking back at her with eyes that held both warning and resignation. Confront him, he said, not with anger, with truth. Make him choose between his fear and his need for you. He paused. Because right now he's trying to have both, and that will destroy you. The elevator doors opened. Marco, Lily called, why are you helping me? He smiled, sad, honest, final. Because he's my brother in everything but blood, and because I think you're the only person who can save him from himself. He stepped into the elevator. Just make sure you survive the process. The doors closed. Lily stood alone in the archives, the envelope heavy in her hands. She looked down at the seal unbroken, damning, impossible to ignore, and she realized Marco had just handed her the one weapon that could either break Tommaso's control or make him tighten it until she couldn't breathe. The office was dark except for the single desk lamp on Tommaso's side of the room. 11:47 p.m., Sunday. The building was empty, security on skeleton crew, cleaners long gone, the city below reduced to distant light and silence. Lily had been working for 3 hours. Tommaso had been watching her for 2. She set down her pen with deliberate precision and looked up. We need to talk, she said. Tommaso didn't move. His hands were steepled in front of him, his expression unreadable in the half-light. About? About why you're lying to me. The temperature in the room dropped. Careful, miss. Conrad. No. Lily stood, her movements controlled, unhurried. I'm done being careful. You've had me in this office for 8 days. You've monitored my movements, controlled my schedule, and installed a panic room in my apartment without asking permission. She moved around her desk, stopping at the neutral ground between them. So either tell me the truth, or tell me to leave. Tommaso's jaw tightened. You're not going anywhere. Then talk to me. There's nothing to discuss. Lily reached into her bag and pulled out the sealed envelope. She set it on his desk with the same care someone might place a loaded gun. Tommaso's gaze dropped to it. His expression didn't change, but she saw the tension ripple through his shoulders. Where did you get that? His voice was dangerously soft. Marco. Something dark and violent flashed in his eyes. What did he tell you? That you've known about Caruso for 3 weeks. Lily's voice was steady, clinical. That you let the leak continue. That you used it as an excuse to bring me deeper into your world. She paused. That you've been controlling this entire situation from the beginning. Tommaso stood slowly, and the movement felt like watching a predator decide whether to attack or retreat. And you believed him. I believe the evidence. Lily gestured to the envelope. Open it. Prove me wrong. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he picked up the envelope, broke the seal, and pulled out the security reports. His eyes scanned them once, twice. Then he set them down and looked at her with an expression carved from stone. This changes nothing, he said. It changes everything. Lily stepped closer. You made me think I was helping you, that I was solving a problem, but you already knew the answers. You just needed me to find them so I'd feel indispensable. You are indispensable. Because you decided I was. Not because I earned it. Her voice sharpened. You don't trust me, Tommaso. You're just keeping me close enough to control. His hands curled into fists at his sides. You don't understand what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Lily held his gaze, refusing to look away. Tell me why you can't let me out of your sight. Why you reacted like that when Marco smiled at me. Why you need to own every moment of my existence, instead of just, because I can't lose you. The words detonated in the silence. Tommaso's expression fractured for half a second before his control slammed back into place. But Lily had seen it, the crack, the rawness beneath the ice. Can't, she repeated quietly. Or won't. He turned away from her, moving to the window. His reflection in the glass looked like a man at war with himself. When I was 8 years old, he said, his voice flat and emotionless, my mother walked out of our home in Naples and never came back. Lily went still. No explanation, no goodbye. One morning she was there, and by evening she was gone. He stared out at the city, his posture rigid. My father told me she couldn't handle the life, the violence, the expectations. She chose freedom over her son. The words fell like stones into deep water. I didn't cry, Tommaso continued. I didn't beg her to come back. I learned the lesson she taught me. Attachment is a weakness. People leave, and if you let yourself need them, they take pieces of you when they go. Lily's throat tightened, but she said nothing. I built everything I have on that principle. He turned to face her, and his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. I don't need people. I use them. I pay them. I control them. And when they're no longer useful, I cut them loose without hesitation. But not me, Lily said softly. No. The admission came out rough, reluctant. Not you. Why? Tommaso was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of something he'd never said aloud. Because when I saw Marco making you smile, I realized I'd been lying to myself for 18 months. He moved toward her slowly, each step deliberate. I told myself you were just efficient, just useful, just a highly competent employee I could replace if necessary. He stopped close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the war being waged behind his eyes. But the truth is, I noticed everything about you from the first week. His voice dropped. The way you take your coffee, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, the way you challenge me with humor instead of fear. He paused. I noticed. And I ignored it. Because noticing meant wanting, and wanting meant risk. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. And now? Now I'm terrified. The confession came out like broken glass, because you're the first person in 15 years who's made me feel anything other than control. And I don't know how to need someone without destroying them. The vulnerability in those words was so raw it felt obscene. Lily stood her ground, forcing herself not to retreat from the intensity radiating off him. So you control me instead? Yes. You manipulate my environment? Yes. You make me feel indispensable so I won't leave. His jaw clenched. Yes. That's not partnership, Tommaso. Her voice was steady, unflinching. That's captivity. I know. He looked at her with eyes that held something broken and desperate. But it's the only way I know how to keep you safe. Safe from what? From being used against me. From being hurt because of who I am. From walking away like everyone else. The words hung between them like a confession and a plea. Lily took a breath, feeling the weight of what he'd just given her, the truth he'd never offered anyone, the wound he'd spent decades cauterizing with power and distance. You can't control whether I stay or leave, she said quietly. You can only control whether I want to. Tommaso stared at her, and something in his expression shifted recognition, maybe, or the first fracture in a wall he'd spent his life building. What do you want from me? His voice was hoarse. Lily stepped closer, closing the distance until they were breathing the same air. I want you to trust me enough to let me choose. Her eyes held his. I want you to stop protecting me from everything, including yourself. I want you to believe that I'm strong enough to stand in your world without breaking. And if I can't? Then you don't want a partner. Her voice was soft, devastating. You want a prisoner. The silence that followed was absolute. Tommaso looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a threat he couldn't neutralize, the one variable in his perfect equation that refused to behave. I was just starting to feel safe around you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. And that's the most dangerous thing I've ever admitted. Lily's breath caught. Because he'd just handed her the one weapon that could destroy him completely. And they both knew she was strong enough to use it. Tommaso's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Lily was already at her desk. She'd arrived early, unable to sleep after last night's conversation. The vulnerability he'd shown still hung between them like smoke, making the air thick and combustible. She watched him answer, his expression shifting from neutral to lethal in the span of 3 seconds. "When?" His voice was ice. A pause. "Contain it. I'll handle the rest." He ended the call and stood, his movements sharp and controlled. Too controlled. "What happened?" Lily asked. "Nothing that concerns you." He was already moving toward his private office, pulling files from his desk with military precision. "Tommaso, I need you to go home." He didn't look at her. "Antonio will drive you. Stay there until I call." Lily stood slowly, her pulse kicking up. "No." He stopped, turned. "Excuse me?" "I said no." She moved around her desk, positioning herself between him and the door. "Whatever just happened? You don't get to send me away without explanation. This isn't a negotiation." "You're right, it's not." Her voice was steady, unflinching. "Because I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on." Tommaso's jaw clenched. A rival faction got hold of surveillance footage from 3 weeks ago. His eyes locked onto hers. "You and Marco, in the outer office." Her stomach dropped. So they're using it to suggest Marco and I are at odds, that there's fracture in the organization." His voice was clipped, professional. "They'll try to exploit it. Which means anyone connected to the situation becomes a target." "Connected meaning me?" "Yes." Lily crossed her arms. "And your solution is to lock me in my apartment and pretend I don't exist?" "My solution is to keep you safe while I neutralize the threat. By hiding me like a liability. By protecting you like an..." He stopped himself, the words dying in his throat. "Like an asset?" Lily stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Is that what you were going to say? Or were you going to say something else?" Tommaso's control fractured at the edges. "Don't do this right now." "Do what?" "Ask you to be honest? Demand you treat me like an adult instead of a possession you need to lock away?" She held his gaze. "You told me last night you were terrified of needing me. But what you're really terrified of is trusting me." "That's not..." "Yes, it is." Her voice cut through his denial like a blade. "You control everything because you're afraid that the moment you let go, I'll disappear. But you're so busy protecting me from danger that you won't let me stand beside you in it. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then tell me." The words came out louder than she intended, echoing in the silence. "Stop deciding what I can handle and let me make my own choices." Tommaso stared at her, something wild and desperate moving behind his eyes. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if something happens to you," his voice broke, just slightly, "if they touch you, hurt you, use you against me, I won't be able to control what I do. And that makes you the most dangerous thing in my life." The confession landed like a physical blow. Lily stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the war being waged in his expression. "You're not afraid of them, Tommaso. You're afraid of yourself. Afraid of how much you feel. Afraid that wanting me makes you weak." "It does." The words came out raw, honest. "You make me weak." "No." Her voice softened, but her eyes held steel. "I make you human. And that terrifies you more than any rival faction ever could." Tommaso's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You don't know what you're asking." "I'm not asking." Lily moved until they were inches apart, her chin tilted up, her gaze unwavering. "I'm telling you, you can't order me to stop seeing you, Tommaso. You can't fire my feelings or reassign my emotions to a different department. You were terrified of my smile because you realized you couldn't control it. You can't control this." The air between them vibrated with tension so thick it felt like lightning before a storm. "I could send you away," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Put you on a plane, move you to a safe house. Make the decision for you." "You could," her voice was steady, "but then you'd prove I was right. That you're too much of a coward to let someone stand beside you instead of behind you. Something in Tommaso's expression shattered. Coward? The word came out soft, lethal. You think I'm afraid? I think you're terrified. Lily held her ground. I think you've spent your entire life convincing yourself that control equals safety. That if you can manage every variable, manipulate every outcome, you won't have to feel what happens when you can't. Stop. But you can't control this. She reached up slowly, her hand hovering near his face. You can't control how I feel. You can't control the fact that I'm choosing to stay even when you give me every reason to run. And you definitely can't control the fact that you're falling apart right now because the idea of losing me is more terrifying than any threat you've ever faced. Tommaso's breathing was harsh, uneven. His eyes were dark storms barely contained behind glass. You want honesty? His voice was almost a growl. Fine. You're right. I am terrified, because I've killed men for less than what I feel when I look at you, because I would burn this entire city down if it meant keeping you safe, because the thought of you walking away makes me want to lock every door and break every window until you have no choice but to stay. He moved forward, backing her against her desk, his hands bracing on either side of her, caging her in without touching. Is that honest enough for you? His voice was rough, raw. Does that make you feel safer? Knowing that you've taken a man who's spent 15 years feeling nothing and turned him into something violent and desperate and completely out of control. Lily's heart slammed against her ribs, but she didn't look away. Yes, she whispered, because now you're finally telling me the truth. Tommaso stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, a weapon he couldn't neutralize, the one person in his entire empire who refused to be what he needed her to be, controllable. Then, he reached up, his hand cupping her jaw with devastating gentleness, his thumb brushing her cheek. You want to stand beside me? His voice was barely above a whisper. You want to be part of this world, knowing what it costs? Yes. Even knowing I won't be gentle? That I'll be possessive and controlling and absolutely unhinged when it comes to your safety? Yes. His eyes searched hers for one more second, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign she didn't understand what she was agreeing to. He found none. Then you're mine. The words weren't a question. They were a claim, a promise, a threat. Not as my secretary, not as my employee, mine. And I don't share. I don't compromise, and I sure as hell don't let go. Good, Lily breathed. Because I don't want gentle, I want real. Something broke in Tommaso's expression, the last wall, the final defense, the control he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. He pulled her against him with bruising force, his mouth crashing against hers in a kiss that felt like warfare and surrender all at once. His hand fisted in her hair, his other arm wrapping around her waist like he could physically bind her to him through sheer force of will. Lily kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands gripping his jacket, pulling him closer, refusing to let him retreat into the safety of distance. This wasn't soft, wasn't sweet, wasn't the kind of kiss that promised happy endings. This was obsession made physical, control breaking into chaos, fear transforming into something far more dangerous, absolute claim. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was ragged, his eyes dark and wild and completely undone. I can't protect you if you're standing next to me, he said, his voice rough. Then don't protect me. Lily's fingers tangled in his collar. Trust me to protect myself, and let me watch your back while you handle your enemies. Tommaso stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance that he'd just lost the only war that mattered. My enemies just became our enemies, he said quietly. And they're about to learn what happens when they threaten what's mine. He stepped back, his expression hardening into something lethal and focused. He pulled out his phone, typed a single message, and hit send. What did you just do? Lily asked. Tommaso looked at her with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. The man who'd just kissed her, vanishing behind the mask of the boss. I just told the entire organization that you're under my personal protection. His voice was flat, emotionless. That any threat to you is a declaration of war against me. Lily's breath caught. Tommaso, you wanted to stand beside me? He moved to the window, his silhouette sharp against the morning light. Welcome to my world, Lily. Hope you're ready for what comes next. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went absolutely murderous. They're already moving, he said quietly. And they're coming for both of us. Because the moment he claimed her, he'd painted a target on her back that no amount of control could erase. The alarm was silent, no sirens, no flashing lights, just a single red notification on Tommaso's phone at 9:34 a.m. Perimeter breach. Sector 7. Response protocol active. Lily saw his expression change before she heard the words. How many exits from this floor? His voice was calm, surgical, the lover from 5 minutes ago replaced by the tactician who'd built an empire on calculated violence. 3. Lily's training kicked in automatically. Main elevator bank, service elevator, emergency stairwell on the west side. They'll cover the main exits first. Tommaso moved to his desk, unlocking a hidden drawer and pulling out a matte black pistol. He checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. Service elevator leads to the parking structure. If they're smart, they've already disabled it. Then we use the stairwell. No. He looked at her, and despite the ice in his voice, she saw the fear underneath. Antonio's mobilizing security teams. They'll be here in 4 minutes. You stay in the inner office, lock the door, and wait for... No. Lily stood, her pulse racing but her mind clear. You just told your entire organization I'm yours. Running and hiding now makes me look like a weakness they can exploit. You're not... I know I'm not. She moved to him, her voice steady. But they don't. And if I disappear the first time someone challenges you, I become the liability you were afraid I'd be. Tommaso stared at her, jaw tight. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to lock her away, to remove her from danger, to control the situation the only way he knew how. But she was right. Stay behind me, he said finally. Do exactly what I say, when I say it. No questions, no hesitation. Agreed. And Lily. He grabbed her arm, his grip firm. If I tell you to run, you run. Non-negotiable. She held his gaze. Only if you're running with me. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, pride, resignation, that he'd just tied himself to the one person he couldn't afford to lose. Let's move. They made it to the service corridor before encountering resistance. 2 men in tactical gear appeared at the far end, professionals, not street muscle. They raised their weapons the moment they saw Tommaso. He pulled Lily behind him, the motion so fast she barely registered it. His gun was up, his body positioned as a shield between her and the threat. You know who I am, Tommaso said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made armies pause. You know what happens if you continue. The lead man's radio crackled, a voice Lily didn't recognize. Secure the girl. Milano's leverage just walked into the corridor. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't about territory. This was about her. Tommaso's hand tightened on his weapon. Not happening, boss. Lily's mind raced through the building schematics she'd memorized during the leak investigation. The service corridor connected to the HVAC control room. From there, access to the building-wide security system, the control room, 30 feet behind them. What about it? I can trigger a facility lockdown from there. Magnetic locks on every door. It'll trap them in the corridor and give your security time to... No. His voice was flat, absolute. Too exposed. I can move faster than you. Smaller target. Lily. You taught me to think strategically. She met his eyes. This is strategy. For one terrible second, she thought he'd refuse, thought he'd choose control over trust, fear over partnership. Then his jaw clenched, and he nodded once. When I engage, you run left. Stay low. I'll cover you. Tommaso. 3 seconds. That's all you get. His eyes burned into hers. Then you lock that door and you don't open it until I come for you. Understood. He shifted his weight, his entire body coiling like a spring. Then he moved. Tommaso stepped into the open, drawing both men's fire with brutal efficiency. His first shot dropped the lead man before he could adjust his aim. The second man dove for cover, giving Lily the opening she needed. She ran. Low, fast, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it over the gunfire. The control room door was industrial steel, reinforced, designed to be impenetrable. She grabbed the handle and yanked. Locked. Panic flared for half a second before training kicked in. She pulled out her black keycard, the one Tommaso had given her weeks ago, and swiped it. The lock disengaged with a heavy click. She was inside. The control room was smaller than she expected, banks of monitors, server racks, a central console that looked like something from a military installation. She found the lockdown protocol interface and initiated the sequence. Facility lockdown initiated. All external doors sealed. Elevator systems disabled. Red lights pulsed through the building. Outside the reinforced door she heard shouting, running footsteps, the controlled chaos of Tommaso's security team arriving. Then silence. Lily waited, her breath coming in short gasps, her hands shaking now that adrenaline was wearing off. A single knock on the door. "It's me." She opened it. Tommaso stood in the corridor, his jacket torn, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding sluggishly, but his eyes were clear, focused, and absolutely locked on her. "You're hurt," she said. "I'm fine." He stepped inside, pulling the door closed behind him. Then he grabbed her shoulders, his hands trembling slightly as he ran them down her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you—" "I'm okay." His forehead dropped to hers, his breath ragged. "Don't ever do that again. Make a strategic decision that saved both our lives? Scare me like that." His voice cracked. "I heard the shots and I thought, I know." She cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. "But I'm still here. We're both still here." Tommaso pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. Not romantic, not gentle, just raw, desperate relief. "They came for you," he said into her hair. "They knew you'd become my—" "Your what?" He pulled back, looking at her with eyes that held something broken and honest and utterly devastating. "Everything," he said quietly. "You've become everything. And that makes you the most dangerous liability I've ever carried. Then drop me." The words hurt to say, but she forced them out. "Send me away. Keep me safe at a distance." "I can't." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I tried. For 18 months I tried to ignore you, to keep you at arm's length, to pretend you were just another employee I could replace." His jaw clenched. "But you made me feel safe. And I don't know how to let go of that." Lily's throat tightened. "What does that mean?" Tommaso reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device, a key fob, high-tech, unmarked. "My private quarters," he said. "Upper level. No one has access except me." He placed it in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "Until now." Lily stared at the device, understanding the weight of what he was giving her. Not just access to his space, access to his life, his vulnerability, the parts of himself he'd never let anyone see. "This isn't about romance," he said, his voice rough. "This is about trust. About making sure that if something happens to me, you can disappear into the one place my enemies will never find. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that." His eyes held hers. "But I know this. I'd rather risk everything I've built than spend another second pretending I can survive without you." The confession hung between them, not a declaration of love, but something more dangerous. Absolute commitment. "The cost of keeping you is war," Tommaso said quietly. "My enemies will come for you. My allies will question my judgment. Everything I've built on control and distance is going to crumble because I chose you. And you're okay with that?" His smile was cold, lethal, and heartbreakingly honest. "I've spent 15 years building an empire that meant nothing." He pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. "You gave me something worth protecting more than power." Lily closed her hand around the key, feeling its weight like a brand. Because Tommaso Milano had just told her she was worth burning his world down for, and she believed him. The city looked different at dawn. Softer, Lily thought. Less dangerous. Though she knew that was an illusion, danger didn't sleep in Tommaso's world. It just waited. She stood in his private quarters, the space she'd unlocked with the key he'd given her 12 hours ago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline, and the room was exactly what she'd expected: minimal, controlled, expensive. Everything in its place. Everything deliberate. Except for the man sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, watching her with eyes that held exhaustion and something rawer. "You didn't sleep," Lily said. "Neither did you." Fair point. After the security teams had cleared the building and removed the bodies, after the reports were filed and the cleanup crews dispatched, Tommaso had brought her here. To his space. His sanctuary. And then he'd simply sat with her in silence while the city bled from night into morning. "The Rossetti family sent the team," Tommaso said now, his voice quiet but steady. "Marco confirmed it an hour ago. They're denying responsibility, but we have evidence." "What happens now?" "War," he said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "Controlled, strategic, inevitable. They challenged me by coming after you. I can't let that stand." Lily turned from the window to face him fully. "Because of your reputation. Because of you." His gaze held hers. "They tried to take what's mine. That requires a response." The possessiveness should have bothered her. A week ago it would have. But now, after everything, she understood it for what it was. His broken, brutal way of saying he cared. "I need to tell you something," Tommaso said, standing slowly. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." Lily nodded. He moved to the window beside her, close but not touching, his reflection overlapping hers in the glass. "If you stay with me, your life changes permanently." His voice was clinical, precise. "You'll be scrutinized by my allies and targeted by my enemies. You'll never have complete privacy again. Every decision you make will be analyzed. Every weakness will be exploited." He paused. "And despite the protection I can offer, there will always be risk." "I know. I'm not finished." He turned to face her directly. "You'll also have power. Real power. Access to resources most people never see. The ability to shape decisions that affect thousands of lives." His jaw tightened. "But that power comes with a price, and once you're inside, there's no clean way out." Lily held his gaze. "Are you trying to scare me away?" "I'm trying to be honest." His expression was unreadable. "For the first time in my life, I'm giving someone a real choice, not a command dressed as an option, a genuine choice. And if I choose to leave?" Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or fear, but his voice remained steady. "Then I'll make sure you're protected. Set up somewhere safe, far from here. You'll have resources, security, everything you need." He paused. "And I won't follow you." The weight of that promise hung between them. "You'd let me go," Lily said softly. "After everything." "Yes." The word cost him. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the rigid control of his expression. "Because keeping you here against your will makes me exactly what you accused me of being, a man who cages what he's afraid to lose." Lily studied him, this man who'd built an empire on control and violence, who'd terrified her and protected her and shown her pieces of himself no one else had ever seen. "I have conditions," she said finally. Tommaso's eyes sharpened. "Tell me." "I won't be your secretary anymore." Her voice was firm, clear. "If I stay, I'm your partner. Not in title, in function. I want to know what's happening. I want to be consulted on decisions that affect me. I want a voice, not just a position beside you." "Done. I'm not finished." She stepped closer. "I won't be hidden when it's convenient or paraded out when it serves your purposes. If I'm yours, then you're mine. Publicly. Undeniably. No more games, no more control through silence." "Agreed." "And Tommaso." She reached up, her hand resting against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "I need you to understand something. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because you've manipulated the situation or backed me into a corner, but because I want to." His hand covered hers, pressing it harder against his heart. "Why?" Because you scare me, she said honestly. And you calm me. Because you're dangerous and broken and absolutely terrifying, and somehow, when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I ever have. She paused. I love you, Tommaso. Not despite your darkness. Because of it. Because you let me see it and trusted me not to run. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with bruising intensity, his face buried in her hair. I don't know how to do this, he said, his voice rough. How to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out together. Lily pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. But I need to hear you say it. Not ownership, not possession. Partnership. Tommaso's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You're my partner, he said, the words deliberate, weighted. In business, in this life, in every dangerous, chaotic, impossible moment we face. His eyes held hers. And I love you. Not because you're useful or controllable or safe. Because you're none of those things, and you make me want to be better than I am. Lily's breath caught. Then Tommaso kissed her, not with the desperate violence of their first kiss, but with something slower, deeper, more certain. A promise made physical. A claim that felt like choice. When he pulled back, his expression had shifted into something focused and decisive. Get dressed, he said. There's something we need to do. The boardroom on the 52nd floor was full. Lily recognized most of the faces, senior executives, department heads, the inner circle of Tommaso's legitimate empire. Marco stood near the window, his expression carefully neutral. Antonio was by the door, arms crossed. Every eye turned when Tommaso entered with Lily at his side. Not behind him, beside him. He led her to the head of the table, his hand resting briefly on her lower back, a touch that was both possessive and supportive. Most of you know Lily Conrad, Tommaso said, his voice carrying the absolute authority that made rooms go silent. For the past 18 months, she's served as my executive assistant. Effective immediately, that changes. Lily felt the weight of every gaze, the speculation, the surprise. Tommaso's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing in full view of everyone present. Miss Conrad is now my partner. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his grip on her hand was steel. She has full access to all operational information. Her authority is second only to mine. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Any disrespect shown to her will be treated as insubordination. Silence. Then, Marco stepped forward, a small smile playing at his lips. Congratulations, Miss Conrad. The room exhaled. One by one, the others followed suit, nods of acknowledgement, murmured congratulations, the careful recalibration of power dynamics playing out in real time. Tommaso didn't wait for the room to settle. He turned to Lily, his expression softening in a way only she could see. This is your world now, he said quietly, meant only for her. You'll never be invisible again. Lily looked at him, this man who'd ignored her for 18 months because seeing her was too dangerous, who'd exploded into jealous obsession over a single smile, who'd nearly destroyed himself trying to keep her safe while keeping her close. Good, she said, her voice steady and sure, because I'm done being ignored. Tommaso's smile was small, private, and absolutely devastating. Then he turned back to the room, his hand still holding hers, and addressed his empire with the woman who'd changed everything standing at his side. Outside, the city woke to another day, indifferent, relentless, unaware that in a boardroom high above it, a mafia boss had just claimed the one thing he couldn't control, and she'd claimed him right back. Because Lily Conrad had never been invisible, she'd just been waiting for a man brave enough to stop looking away.